Michael Harper remembered the sound before he remembered the words. The sharp click of the suitcase handle locking into place echoed through the hallway like something final, like a door closing somewhere deep inside his chest. It was early evening, that gray hour when the suburban streetlights hadn't yet flickered on, and the house smelled faintly of burnt pasta and laundry detergent. Rachel stood near the front door, her coat already on. She looked composed, almost serene, the way she did when she'd made a decision long before anyone else knew it was coming. "I can't do this anymore," she said, not looking at him. Michael was still holding a fork. He had been feeding Grace at the kitchen table, helping her with peas she kept pushing to the edge of her plate. Grace was 3 too young to understand words like anymore or this, but old enough to sense when something was wrong. "Do what?" Michael asked quietly. Rachel exhaled, impatient. This life, the house, the routine, always waiting, always settling. She finally turned toward him, her eyes sharp, almost defensive. "I'm not happy, Michael." Lucas appeared in the doorway then, 9 years old, shoulders already tense the way Michael recognized as fear. Emma and Noah lingered behind him, clutching each other like they did during thunderstorms. Michael set the fork down slowly. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. Rachel nodded. "I need to. I've met someone. He sees me. He wants more. I want more." The words landed heavily, one after another, each one reshaping the room. Michael felt something split inside him, not loudly, not violently, but with a dull, irreversible crack. "And the kids?" he asked. Rachel's gaze flicked toward them, hesitated. "You're a good father. You'll manage. I can't stay just because I'm needed." Lucas took a step forward. "Mom?" Rachel knelt, smoothing his hair, but the gesture felt rehearsed. "I love you," she said quickly. "All of you. This isn't your fault." Michael watched the scene as if from underwater. He noticed strange details. The way Rachel's hand trembled slightly, the scuff on Noah's sock, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence she left behind. "You're choosing this," Michael said at last. Rachel straightened. "I'm choosing myself." She opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the distant sound of traffic and a neighbor's dog barking. For a moment, just a moment, Michael thought she might turn back. She didn't. The door closed. The house went still. Emma began to cry first, then Noah. Grace reached for Rachel's empty chair, confused. Michael stood there, surrounded by the rawness of it all, knowing with terrifying clarity that whatever version of his life existed before this moment was gone. He knelt down, gathering them into his arms. He didn't promise things would be okay. He didn't lie. He just stayed. And somewhere deep inside him, a quiet resolve began to form, not born of hope or forgiveness, but of necessity. He would endure. He would raise them. He would survive the long silence she had chosen. Outside, Rachel's car pulled away, unaware that the family she left behind was already changing in ways she would never fully understand. The first thing Michael learned was that absence had weight. It settled into the house like a second roof pressing down, invisible but constant. Rachel's side of the bed stayed cold. Her coffee mug remained untouched in the cabinet, as if waiting. The children stopped asking when she would come home after the 3rd week, not because they understood, but because asking hurt too much. Michael returned to work 10 days after she left. The construction firm was loud, full of dust and men who spoke in blunt jokes and unfiltered opinions. Someone clapped him on the shoulder the first morning and said, "Heard about your wife. Tough luck, man." Another said nothing, just looked at him a little longer than necessary, the way people do when they're deciding whether to pity you or blame you. At 4:30 every afternoon, Michael left no matter what. Meetings ended abruptly. Overtime vanished. His supervisor raised an eyebrow once. "Everything okay at home?" Michael nodded. "Has to be." Money became a quiet enemy. Daycare for Grace, after-school programs for the others, groceries that vanished faster than he expected. He learned the rhythm of coupons, clearance racks, meals that stretched into leftovers. He stopped buying things for himself altogether, To new clothes, no lunches out, no indulgences that couldn't be justified. At night, when the house finally slept, he sat at the kitchen table with bills spread out like evidence. He didn't curse. He didn't cry. He calculated. The children changed in ways that were easy to miss if you weren't watching closely. Lucas became efficient. He set alarms. He packed his siblings' lunches without being asked. He stopped complaining about chores and started correcting Emma when she forgot hers. At school, his teachers praised his maturity. Michael wondered if they knew what it cost. Emma, 7, withdrew into politeness. She said please and thank you with a careful tone, as if afraid of taking up too much space. She stopped asking questions she didn't already know the answer to. Sometimes Michael caught her standing in Rachel's old closet, fingers grazing empty hangers, expression unreadable. Noah, 5, developed a habit of pretending nothing had happened. He talked about his mother in the present tense, casually, as if she were simply in another room. Mom doesn't like carrots, he'd say at dinner, and then keep eating. Michael never corrected him. Grace cried at night for months. Michael learned how to function on 4 hours of sleep, how to braid hair poorly but with effort, how to sign permission slips while stirring pasta sauce. He learned the geography of the grocery store, the timing of traffic lights, the precise angle to hold Grace so she would fall asleep on his chest. On Sundays, they went to the park because it was free. Other families sat on blankets, couples leaning into each other, mothers sharing snacks and gossip. Michael felt their glances, not hostile, just curious. The absence of a woman beside him became a visible thing. One afternoon, a woman from Lucas's class approached him near the swings. "It must be hard," she said kindly, "doing it all alone." Michael smiled the way he had learned to. "We're managing." She hesitated. "Children need their mother, you know." The sentence stayed with him long after she walked away. That night, Michael lay awake, listening to the house breathe. He thought of Rachel somewhere else, laughing, touching another life, unburdened by schedules and responsibility. He wondered if she ever imagined this version of him, exhausted and quiet, holding everything together with routine and restraint. He didn't hate her. That surprised him most. What he felt was something colder, more enduring, a recalibration. His world had narrowed to 4 small gravitational centers, and everything else fell away. Occasionally, Rachel sent money. Inconsistent amounts, no messages attached, no calls, no birthdays. Michael never mentioned it to the children. He placed the checks in a separate envelope, used them only for school supplies or shoes, never groceries. Something about that felt dishonest. At night, after everyone slept, he sometimes allowed himself small memories. Rachel's laugh in the car, the way she used to steal fries from his plate. Those memories hurt, but they were clean. They didn't ask for anything. One evening, Lucas lingered in the kitchen after homework. "Dad," he said, not meeting Michael's eyes, "did Mom leave because of us?" Michael closed the laptop slowly. "No," he said. "She left because of a choice she made." Lucas nodded once, absorbing the words carefully, like something fragile. "Okay," he said, and went to bed. Michael sat there for a long time after, understanding that the children weren't just growing up. They were growing around a wound, shaping themselves to accommodate it. The quiet aftermath wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches, no slam doors, no scenes that would look significant from the outside. Just accumulation. Day after day of showing up, of not leaving, of choosing to stay even when no one was watching. And in that quiet persistence, something solid began to form. Family no longer defined by who had walked away, but by who remained. Time did not heal the wound. It organized itself around it. By the 3rd year, the house had learned a new, rhythmless, chaotic, more efficient. Michael woke before dawn, brewed cheap coffee, reviewed schedules taped to the refrigerator like a military plan. Mondays were soccer practice, Wednesdays were library night, Fridays were frozen pizza and a movie chosen by committee. The structure wasn't joyless, but it was deliberate, built to prevent collapse. Stability came slowly, earned rather than hoped for. Michael was promoted to site manager at 39, not because he asked, but because he never called in sick, never left the job unfinished, never failed to deliver. He spoke less at work now, listened more. His coworkers trusted him with responsibility, with silence. Some admired him quietly. Others whispered, "Poor guy. Wife ran off." Michael let the narrative exist. Correcting it felt unnecessary. He bought a used minivan when the sedan finally died. It smelled faintly of crayons and old upholstery, but it ran reliably. Reliability became his standard for everything. The children grew into themselves unevenly. Lucas, by 15, had developed a seriousness that unsettled teachers and impressed coaches. He woke at 5 to run before school, trained like someone preparing for a future he refused to articulate. He rarely spoke about his mother. When friends complained about their parents, Lucas stayed quiet, jaw tight, eyes distant. Emma became observant, dangerously so. She learned to read moods the way other children read books. She could tell when Michael was tired before he admitted it, when Lucas was angry before he raised his voice. She wrote constantly, filling notebooks with stories she never shared. Sometimes Michael found them stacked neatly under her bed, titles written in pencil, endings unfinished. Noah turned humor into armor. He learned early that laughter redirected attention, softened moments before they broke. Teachers described him as a delight, a joy to have in class. Michael noticed how quickly Noah changed the subject when conversations drifted toward family. Grace, the youngest, remembered Rachel only in fragments, a scent, a voice that no longer matched any face. She asked fewer questions as she grew older, as if instinctively understanding that some answers would fracture the delicate balance of their lives. On the outside, they looked functional, healthy, even enviable in a quiet way. Inside, each of them carried something unsaid. Rachel existed mostly as an idea now. She sent Christmas cards sporadically, thin, glossy things featuring skyline views, wine glasses catching light, captions written in a confident, looping script. "Hope you're all well. Thinking of you." The return addresses changed every few years. Seattle, San Diego, New York. Michael never displayed them. He placed them in a drawer with old insurance papers and expired warranties, artifacts without present use. Occasionally, Emma found Rachel online. "She looks happy," Emma said once, showing Michael a photo on her phone. Rachel stood on a rooftop somewhere, hair perfectly styled, arm looped through a man in a tailored jacket. The city behind them glowed. Michael studied the image carefully. Rachel's smile was wide, practiced. The man's hand rested possessively at her waist. "I'm glad," Michael said, and meant something adjacent to truth. Rachel's life, from afar, looked successful. Promotions, travel, dinners and restaurants Michael could never justify taking 4 children to. She curated her existence carefully, a version of herself that appeared unburdened by the past. What the children didn't see, and Michael suspected but never confirmed, were the fractures behind the images. The way success built on escape eventually demanded payment. Michael dated once. It lasted 3 months. The womankind, patient, recently divorced herself, invited him to dinner after the 3rd date. Michael declined. He couldn't articulate why the thought of sitting across from her, sharing something fragile, felt impossible. He ended it gently, honestly. "I don't have space," he said. She nodded, understanding more than she let on. By the time Lucas turned 18, the house felt quieter, but not emptier. The children no longer needed Michael in the same constant, physical way. They needed him differently now, as reference, as anchor, as proof that someone stayed. On Lucas's graduation day, Rachel sent a message for the first time in years. "Tell him I'm proud." Michael stared at the phone for a long time before responding. "You can tell him yourself," he typed, then deleted it. Instead, he put the phone away. At the ceremony, Michael watched Lucas cross the stage with a controlled stride, shoulders squared, expression composed. Applause echoed around the gymnasium. Parents cheered loudly. Some cried. Michael stood, clapped, felt a tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with pride alone. Afterward, Lucas hugged him briefly. "Thanks for everything," he said, voice steady. Michael nodded. Words felt inadequate. That night, as Michael washed dishes alone, he realized something quietly profound. The years had not merely passed, they had shaped them, hardened some edges, softened others. The children were no longer defined by abandonment, but neither were they untouched by it. Far away, Rachel posted a congratulatory photo. "So proud of my firstborn," the caption read. The comments flooded in. Hearts, applause emojis, admiration. Michael turned off the light in the kitchen and went upstairs, the house settling around him like a familiar weight. Becoming, he had learned, wasn't always visible. Sometimes it happened in the spaces where someone else chose not to be. Rachel learned the sound of silence in expensive places. It was different from the quiet she remembered from her old life, the suburban hush broken by children's voices and appliances. This silence lived in glass-walled apartments and hotel rooms with city views, in spaces designed to impress but not to hold. Her second marriage had begun like a vindication. Jonathan Pierce was everything Michael wasn't. Decisive, charismatic, well-networked. He moved easily through boardrooms and cocktail parties, introduced Rachel as my wife, with a proprietary pride that once felt reassuring. With him, she believed she had finally stepped into the life she was meant for. For a while, the illusion held. They lived in Manhattan, then Boston, then back to New York again. Rachel's career in brand consulting flourished. Her Instagram told a coherent story. Rooftop dinners, tailored dresses, strategic smiles. She posted rarely about Jonathan, but when she did, it was carefully framed, his hand on hers, his profile turned toward the city, never quite looking at the camera. What the images didn't capture were the arguments that grew quieter over time. Jonathan didn't shout. He corrected. He dismissed. He forgot to ask Rachel about her day. When she spoke, he listened, just long enough to reply with something efficient, conclusive. "You worry too much," he told her once, eyes already back on his phone. Rachel learned to swallow thoughts mid-sentence. They never talked about children. When Rachel mentioned the ones she had left behind, Jonathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That was your past," he said. "Let's not complicate the present." So she didn't. The first crack appeared the night Rachel forgot Jonathan's firm dinner. It was a small thing, an overlap of schedules, a client emergency, but Jonathan's disappointment landed with disproportionate weight. "You made me look unreliable," he said calmly in their kitchen. "That's not acceptable." Rachel stared at him, something old stirring uncomfortably in her chest. The accusation wasn't new. It was familiar in a way she didn't like examining. After that, distance became routine. Jonathan traveled more. Rachel filled the gaps with work, with curated posts, with dinner reservations for one. At night, she lay awake beside him, scrolling through comments from strangers who admired a life she no longer felt inside. Occasionally, guilt surfaced. Not dramatically, not in tears, but in flashes. A memory of Lucas's serious eyes, Emma's careful politeness, Grace's small hand slipping from hers all those years ago. Rachel pushed those thoughts away. She told herself she had done what she needed to survive, that staying would have destroyed her, that motherhood wasn't supposed to feel like disappearance. Then came the morning Jonathan didn't come home. No note, no apology, just a text hours later. "We should talk. I've moved my things." The conversation that followed was brief, clinical. "I need something different," Jonathan said, voice devoid of emotion. "This isn't working." Rachel waited for anger, for devastation. What came instead was a hollow clarity. She had seen this ending before, just from the other side. The divorce unfolded quickly, efficiently. Lawyers spoke more than they did. Assets were divided with practiced neutrality. Rachel moved into a smaller apartment overlooking an alley instead of a skyline. Online, nothing changed. She posted throwbacks, quotes about resilience, photos of coffee cups and books, captions about new chapters and growth. The engagement stayed high. Friends commented supportive emojis. Strangers admired her strength. At night, Rachel sat alone on the couch, laptop closed, phone face down. The apartment hummed with distant traffic. She poured herself a glass of wine and didn't drink it. Loneliness arrived without drama. It showed up She thought of Michael then, not as the man she left, but as the one who stayed. She imagined the children grown, wondered what they called home now. if they still thought of her as their mother, or as something more abstract, a cautionary absence. One evening, scrolling through old emails, Rachel found a school photo attachment Michael had sent years ago. She had never replied. She opened it. 4 children stood in front of a brick building, older than she remembered, expressions guarded but composed. They were measured in choices. Rachel waited 3 days before sending the message. She drafted it in fragments, deleted sentences, softened others, removed anything that sounded like apology without quite daring to say the word. When she finally pressed send, it was nearly midnight in New York. Hi, Michael. I don't know if this is welcome. I've been thinking about you and the kids a lot. I'd like to see you, if that's answered emails. The message stayed with him, heavy but contained, like an object placed carefully in a pocket. That evening, Emma noticed his distraction. Something happened, she asked, not looking up from her notebook. She wore a simple coat, nothing like the tailored dresses she once favored. She practiced breathing, posture, softness. When Michael walked in, she almost didn't recognize him. He looked older, not worn, but grounded. His hair was grayer, his movements unhurried. He smiled politely, the way one does with a former colleague. Hi, Rachel, he said. She stood quickly. Michael. They sat. For a moment, neither spoke. The cafe hummed around them, steam, cups, conversations overlapping. You look well, Rachel said. So do you, Michael replied, and she knew it wasn't entirely true. They spoke carefully at first, work, logistics, safe topics. Then Rachel leaned forward, voice quieter. I miss them, she said. I think about them all the time. Michael nodded once. They're doing well. I'd like to see them, Rachel said. I know I don't have the right to ask, but... You can ask, Michael said calmly. That doesn't mean the answer will be what you want. The words landed harder than anger would have. Rachel swallowed. I thought... After all this time... Time doesn't erase, Michael said. It settles. When Rachel finally met the children again, it was in Michael's living room, a space they had grown into without her. Lucas joined by video call from his dorm. He was polite, distant. Emma sat with her legs crossed, expression neutral, eyes assessing. Noah nodded, offered a half smile, made a joke that didn't quite land. Grace stared openly. You don't sound like I remember, she said. Rachel's breath caught. I know, she whispered. She reached for connection the way one reaches for something fragile, too slowly, too carefully. She apologized, but not enough, explained, but too late. Each child received her words differently, filtering them through years of absence. After an hour, Rachel stood. I'm glad you're okay, she said, voice trembling. They didn't ask her to stay longer. When the door closed behind her, Michael remained where he was. Rachel walked to her car, chest tight, understanding at last that the family she left had not been waiting. They had been becoming. The second meeting happened at Michael's insistence, not Rachel's. If you're going to try, he had said on the phone, voice even, it needs to be consistent, not dramatic, not sudden. Rachel agreed too quickly. They chose a Saturday afternoon, a quiet restaurant near the river, casual enough to avoid ceremony, public enough to prevent collapse. The kind of place families came to when they wanted normalcy more than pleasure. Michael arrived with Emma, Noah, and Grace. Lucas joined again by video call, his face framed by dorm room posters and a half-made bed. Rachel was already seated, hands folded tightly around a water glass. For a moment, no one spoke. Rachel looked at them as if memorizing. 12 years of growth compressed into seconds. They were taller, sharper, more contained than the children she had left. Thank you for coming, she said. Emma nodded. You asked, polite, controlled. The waiter arrived, menus distributed. The interruption offered relief. Noah ordered first, voice bright. Burger, no onions. He smiled at Rachel briefly, then turned back to his phone. His ease felt practiced, a shield worn smooth by years of use. Grace studied Rachel openly. You look different in pictures, she said. Rachel smiled weakly. Pictures lie sometimes. Grace considered this. Dad says they only show what people want. Rachel glanced at Michael. He didn't react. Lucas spoke from the screen. I have a class in 40 minutes, he said, so we should probably talk. Rachel straightened. Of course. She turned to him, voice careful. I'm proud of you. Lucas nodded once. I know, you said that online. The words were not sharp. They were worse, flat, factual, uninterested in effect. Emma watched everything. She noticed the way Rachel leaned forward when Lucas spoke, the way her hands tightened when he didn't fill the silence. Why now? Emma asked suddenly. Rachel hesitated. Because I've made mistakes. Because I thought enough time had passed. Emma's eyes hardened slightly. Time passed for us, too. Silence settled again, thicker this time. Noah laughed softly. It's weird, he said. You're like someone we know about but don't really know. Rachel flinched, then nodded. That's fair. Grace spoke last. Are you staying? Rachel opened her mouth, closed it. I don't know, she said honestly. Grace leaned back in her chair, arms crossing. Then don't promise stuff. Cold, clear, final. When the food arrived, conversation fractured into fragments. Weather, school, logistics. Rachel tried to engage, but every question felt like trespassing. She realized she didn't know their rhythms, their inside jokes, the shorthand of shared experience. Michael watched quietly, not intervening, not rescuing. This was not his moment to manage. When Lucas's call ended, he said goodbye politely and disconnected without ceremony. Rachel stood soon after. I won't push, she said. I just wanted to see you. Emma nodded again. Noah offered a small wave. Grace didn't move. Outside, Rachel lingered, waiting for something, for an invitation, a sign, a door left open. Michael stepped beside her. They're not cruel, he said gently. They're cautious. Rachel nodded, eyes wet but steady. I taught them that. Michael didn't contradict her. As she walked away, Rachel understood the truth she had avoided since the beginning. She had returned expecting recognition, perhaps even redemption. What she had encountered instead were strangers, shaped by her absence, each carrying it differently, each unwilling to pretend it hadn't mattered. And for the first time, Rachel didn't resent them for it. Rachel asked to see Michael alone. Not immediately, not in the charged hours after the reunion, when emotions still hummed too loudly. She waited a week, then another. When she finally reached out, the message was simpler than the ones before. Could we talk? Just us. Michael agreed, the same way he had agreed to everything since her return. Without urgency, without resistance. They met in the late afternoon at the Riverwalk, a place Michael often came to clear his thoughts. The water moved steadily beside them, indifferent to memory. Rachel arrived early again, pacing this time, her composure thinner. Michael approached slowly, hands in his jacket pockets. You wanted to talk, he said. Rachel nodded. I did. They walked for a while before she spoke. The city softened around them, joggers passing, a couple arguing quietly on a bench, the distant sound of traffic. I thought you'd be angry, Rachel said finally. Or still in love. Michael stopped, turned to her. I was angry, he said, a long time ago. Rachel's chest tightened. And now? Now I'm finished. The words weren't cruel, they were clean. Rachel looked at him, searching his face for something. Resentment, grief, accusation. She found none. Did I mean anything to you? She asked, the question breaking through her restraint at last. Michael considered her carefully. You were my wife, he said. You were the mother of my children. You mattered. But that version of us ended the day you left. Rachel swallowed hard. I didn't think you'd be like this. Whole? Michael asked gently. She nodded, tears finally escaping. I thought maybe, she said, voice shaking, that I could come back and we could at least understand each other. We do, Michael said. That's why this is final. They stood in silence, the river moving beside them. I carried everything, Rachel whispered. Guilt, justification, regret. I thought if I faced you, something would release. Michael exhaled slowly. Release doesn't come from other people. It comes from accepting what you can't undo. Rachel wiped her face. Do you forgive me? Michael didn't answer immediately. I don't live in forgiveness, he said at last. I live in responsibility. I stayed. I raised them. I built something. That doesn't require forgiving you or hating you. Rachel nodded, absorbing the truth like a verdict. You don't need me anymore, she said. No, Michael agreed. I don't. The admission hurt her more than anger ever could. They walked back toward the parking lot. At the edge, Rachel stopped. I won't interfere, she said, with the kids, with your life. Michael met her eyes. That's up to them. Rachel managed a small, broken smile. Of course. As she turned away, Rachel understood that the confrontation she had feared, shouting, accusations, emotional wreckage, had been replaced by something far more devastating. Peace. Not shared, not offered, earned elsewhere. Rachel did not disappear after that. She simply learned where she no longer belonged. In the weeks that followed, she sent no messages. She didn't ask for updates, didn't comment on photos, didn't look for signs of softening. For the first time in years, restraint was not strategic, it was respectful. The children moved forward in ways that were subtle but unmistakable. Lucas came home for Thanksgiving and didn't mention his mother once. He helped Michael fix a loose stair railing, talked about classes, about a girl he liked but hadn't yet told. When Michael listened, Lucas looked at him with something close to certainty, an unspoken acknowledgement of who had been there. Emma finished her first full manuscript that winter. She let Michael read it. The story wasn't about abandonment. It was about endurance, about a family that learned to speak in glances and quiet routines. Rachel appeared only once, unnamed, already fading. Noah made varsity his junior year. After his first game, he searched the bleachers instinctively, then smiled when he found Michael standing alone, clapping too hard. That was enough. Grace, now 15, stopped asking questions she already knew the answers to. She grew steadier, less watchful. When a teacher asked her to list her guardians on a form, she wrote one name without hesitation. Michael watched all of this with a restrained pride. He didn't frame it as victory. He understood better than anyone that survival didn't require witnesses. His life had narrowed, yes, but within that narrowing, something precise had formed. Mornings of quiet coffee, evenings of conversation that didn't need to explain itself. A family defined not by who left, but by who stayed long enough to become irreplaceable. Rachel followed from a distance. She stopped posting online as frequently. When she did, the captions lost their urgency. No declarations, no reinventions, just fragments of days' books, streets, the occasional unfiltered thought. Once, she almost sent a message on Grace's birthday. She didn't. Instead, she walked along the river alone, watching families pass, some laughing, some strained, all temporary in their own ways. She understood now that love was not a feeling preserved by memory, but a structure maintained by presence. And presence, once abandoned, could not always be reclaimed. On a quiet evening months later, Michael sat on the porch as the sun set, the house behind him filled with familiar sounds. Emma read inside, Noah argued on the phone, Grace practiced piano, imperfect but persistent. Michael closed his eyes. He thought briefly of Rachel, not with bitterness, not with longing, but with the calm clarity of someone who had already carried the weight and set it down. Some choices, he knew, didn't destroy love. They rewrote it. Rachel would live with that knowledge for the rest of her life, not as punishment, but as truth. And the family she left behind would continue, not loudly, not triumphantly, but whole.